Welcome to the Woman to Woman show here on Confident Women Ireland's YouTube channel with me, Roisin Nicleric. In this video, we will be discussing the importance of microbiomes, gut health and women's health, understanding why microbiome is essential for women's health and well-being. Gut imbalances are a common root cause for many women's health issues. Even if you don't have a digestive symptom, changes in your gut health may promote infections, anxiety, heavy periods, and other symptoms. The health of your microbiome connects to everything else in our bodies. In this video, we will dive into the microbiome and its role in women's health. As women, our microbiomes are unique and are influenced by hormonal changes throughout our lives, from our health and well-being. Our gut health is important, especially in the face of reproductive and hormonal issues. We will be discussing all of this with Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace-Ryan. Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace-Ryan will be explaining and discussing the microbiomes and their influences on our gut health throughout our bodies, and how they are critical to our overall health and maintaining balance and well-being. Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace-Ryan is a gut health expert, a consultant in gastroenterologist, I hope I pronounced that right, and author of the children's books, Bugs of War. Bugs of War, What You Eat Can Help You Win. It's a children's book, and you can find all the information to how you can obtain this book in the description box below. Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace-Ryan recorded a previous video, and I will post that link in the description box below. Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace-Ryan, thank you so much for joining us again on the Woman to Woman show here on Confident Women Ireland.
It's a pleasure, Roisin. Thank you very much for inviting me. I love to talk to you.
Dr. Anne-Marie, you know what? When we did our previous interview, and we talked about your book, The Bugs of War, What You Eat Can Help You Win, I have become fascinated with microbiomes. Still don't know too much about them, but every time I hear the word or see the word, I'm intrigued and I want to know more. And I really then started reading just on the articles, where you see on social media where they go, women's health, microbiomes, gut health. I become intrigued and I go, Anne-Marie said that, the book, the children books. And I've also become fascinated how it's so important. Our gut health, our microbiomes are important in women's health.
Hugely important. Yeah. Hugely. And it's an evolving science, Roisin. It just is. There's a huge amount of research being done all over the world. It's changing all the time. I mean, in medicine in general, every single hour of every single day, there's more research being published, more research being done, obviously, all over the world. And don't forget, a lot of the models that they've done research on are on animal models. And I know there's objections to all that, but actually it is the only way. You can't experiment on humans. And there's loads and loads of studies that are done on the microbiome. Indeed, a lot in Cork now in our own Microbiome Institute, which is unbelievably advanced and world-class research coming out of it. And it's fascinating. So it's an evolving science, which I absolutely love. And I do as much as I can, but I have to do my day job too, obviously. So I'd study, though, for a couple of hours every single day, reading up and preparing talks and that, yeah.
And, we've done an intensive interview before about microbiomes, but could you just give our viewers a gentle reminder of what microbiomes are? And I'll put in the link, as I said in the intro, to the previous interview in the description box below.
Okay. Well, just basically in a nutshell, when thousands and millions of years ago, when animals and bacteria were sharing the planet, they discovered, well, it came by just natural selection, really, that animals couldn't digest fiber and plants, and the bacteria could. So the bacteria started living in us and on us. And in return for a cozy bed, mainly in the large bowel, they digest our fiber. and we benefit from it. And over the years, there was various ideas about how important fibre was. From our own Dennis Burkett, a surgeon who was from Ireland and worked in Africa in the 1960s. And he was seeing how important fibre was. And it's not until about the year 2000 when they mapped the human genome, and they found that although humans have 21,000 genes, the microbiome that lives in us and on us have 4.4 million genes. So they're much more important actually than anything. We're only 10% human and 90% microbial. So subsequent studies have shown that there's more, say, bugs live on my thumb than there is people in England. There's 100 trillion in our large bowel. And when, say, the likes of Dennis Burkett thought, well, fibre is important, thought it was just kind of to make us poo. Now it's found out that the microbiome actually runs our entire system. So 100 trillion, mainly bacteria, some viruses, fungi, and archaea. And when you eat fibrous foods, they convert it into little messaging molecules, the neurotransmitters that make us work, the hormones that make us work, all the enzymes that make us work. Everything is made from our food in our large bowel, 90% of our serotonin, which is our happy hormone. So now it is relating all back that health really does begin and end in the gut. And your health begins and ends with what you give it to eat. Really, it's as simple as that. Yeah.
Fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. It's fascinating. And you know, I have done what I've done all the years, right? And scoping mainly. And it was only in latter years when I started reading up about the microbiome. I just wasn't able to understand why people were getting the things they did, why there was so many cancers, so many autoimmune illnesses, and so much depression, the second commonest thing in the world now, by the way, so much bowel cancer. And it was since I started doing all this and have gone really deep into it, now I see what's the cause of everything is our diet and our lifestyle. It is all a huge big thing, but I'll go into that with you. It's a big Venn diagram, but the diet is central because we've huge control over our diet. We don't have over a lot of other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So before we get into our diet and lifestyle, there's an emerging role of gut microbiome in women's health, especially how women is unique in our body, and there's a difference in women's bodies and men's body. Can you tell us about that?
Look, women are 50% of the world's population after all. And it plays a massive role in all ages of both women and men, obviously. But the women have the added thing that they are hormonal through their lives, where men aren't really. So it plays a massive role in that. And, you know, when you're younger, you lay down the seeds for your future health. And I think that's where things are going a bit wrong now. Young women are not eating properly, possibly drinking too much, all those kind of things. And because of the way our hormones work and because estrogen is such an important hormone to women. And then what happens is when you come to the menopause, even though there's estrogen receptors all over our bodies, there's no estrogen anymore. And we flounder because if our bodies are metabolically unhealthy by then, we're going to find the menopause and all its complications way harder. And it is also the time that a lot of the kind of diseases start in people. I mean, by the time you get to 65, 80% of people have at least one chronic illness. And that's women and men, but women are important on every level. Of course, we're wonderful anyway. I think we rule the world, and women, you know, it's like horses, a good mare is better than any stallion, and all that kind of thing. And I'm all up for women, but also women, and this is not being kind of misogynistic, but the women are mainly the ones that do the cooking in the home and mainly the ones that do the caring, and not exclusively, and I know that, but the women are the ones with control of the shopping and control of the food of the family. And in that way, we're awfully important also. So yeah, it's on every level. It's so important. Yeah.
And so if we start from women, from puberty,
Mm.
so children, how does our microbiomes from, it starts, doesn't it? Our microbiomes start from our mother's diet. And is it genetic? Is our
Yeah.
microbiomes genetic?
To a point, absolutely. When a woman is pregnant, it's becoming awfully important. And in fact, the first is it 400 days of your life are awfully important, and that's from conception, right? So you're talking about what your mother ate at around the time she got pregnant on. And there's a lot of research being done. Now you can appreciate, Roisin, you can't do human research on this. So this is all animal studies, but it's also longitudinal studies. And they're able to do longitudinal studies now to see about the health of women at any one time, and then fast forward it forward to see did it make a difference subsequent in life to their children's health when they were in midlife. And it's an extraordinary science. And there's some studies coming out that show that even when there was a sugar rationing around World War II, that the babies that were conceived around them then, before sugar rationing stopped, and the ones that were conceived around the time it was going to be stopped, the difference in their subsequent metabolic health was enormous. And it's absolutely extraordinary. So those longitudinal studies are ongoing. And what you eat is awfully important to your unborn fetus. Absolutely. And what you drink. And there's a lot of science. And wind forward then to when you are just giving birth by whichever method. And then the breast milk, if you can breastfeed, it is enormously important because it gives a whole basis of a microbiome to the baby, as does passing through the birth canal, if it is a natural birth, obviously. They haven't been showing that this seeding thing is amounting to much. Where you have a cesarean section delivery, but you kind of smear kind of the afterbirth and that over the child. It's not really, doesn't seem to be really helping in their future health. But anyway, so what you, from the very word go, from you're the tiniest little dot, the microbiome matters. And there's huge studies, but it's a difficult area to study because it's very emotive. Some women, just by one means or another, are metabolically unhealthy before they ever get pregnant. Then there's others that have to have a section, that just can't, for one reason or another, breastfeed. And I don't want people feeling guilty or anything about this, but in an ideal world, the mother would eat very well, including the likes of things like nuts and shellfish and all the things that set off allergies subsequent in life, would give birth naturally, would breastfeed. But in an ideal world, that doesn't always happen to any of us. And I appreciate that. But yes, the microbiome from the get-go is showing to be increasingly important.
So then if we fast forward then to puberty,
Yeah.
What is the relationship between the microbiome within our gut and to teenagers going through puberty?
Well, it's evolving all the time. Don't forget your microbiome can change within a couple of weeks if you eat a bit differently. So the puberty will affect it, of course, because hormones affect everything. But the main problem with puberty is that youngsters can be eating at that stage quite unsatisfactorily. Like it's been shown in the UK that 60% of calories probably at that age come from ultra processed food. And the ultra processed food, if nothing else, in a nutshell, completely confuses your microbiome. So it actually doesn't know what it is. It's not kind of the way it's packaged. You know, you've got sweeteners, say, in a food, and your taste buds expect sugar, and your microbiome is all prepared to deal with the sugar, as is your liver. And next thing, it's not sugar at all. It's a sweetener, which is artificial. So around the time of puberty, along with all the peer pressure and the image thing and everything else, the microbiome can be floundering because, you know, monster drinks and pot noodles and all those things are just so deleterious to us. And in an ideal world, of course, teenagers would eat a share of what I love as food, like all the plant-based foods. but they could become increasingly difficult to get to do that. So it's not so much that the microbiome is different, is kind of changing all the time anyway from birth to death. It's that there's external pressures, fear pressure, image pressure, phone pressure, all that is much worse around the time of puberty.
So we started off with pregnancy,
yeah,
and puberty. So then if we move fast forward then to the menopause,
yeah,
and as you said, a lot of the chronic health diseases then begin by the time you're 65.
yeah,
The menopause, this is where I really became focused on my health, was during my menopause, and really post-menopause was really when I started. So
okay.
tell us about the gut and the microbiome with women going through the changes, the reverse of puberty to the non-reproductive organs, where the body's changing anyway. The whole body's reversing and changing.
Yeah, the body is yeah, it's reversing and changing, and the menopause starts kind of I suppose when you have had your last period, then there's the menopause. Commonest age is 51. The perimenopause then is the time prior to that. So basically it's all down to estrogen and progesterone, and your estrogen receptors are all over your body, as I've said, and then it's not available to them. And what is really been shown with the menopause, which is very tricky, don't forget, and half of the population go through it, don't forget either, is that what you eat is absolutely, completely vital then. It's vital anyway. But they did a huge study showing that a massive study, I think it was something like 60,000 women, and it showed that menopause symptoms, those hot flushes, etc., that happen, and the weight gain, etc., that happen because of the hormonal changes, were 30% at least less with a more optimal diet. So the diet has a huge effect on it. Now, menopause expert, I'm not in the main, but like you, I've gone through the menopause. I noticed myself, who am naturally very slim, that when I ate the likes of crisps and ice cream, i.e. oily and high sugar foods, I would get a tummy on me like I was pregnant. And at that stage, because I'm well on from that now, I didn't actually really link it to my diet as much. I would have always had a healthy diet, and this was totally new to me. And whereas I would have always been a lightweight, I put on maybe 4 kilos that I wouldn't have had before, but I was still very slim, but it was 4 kilos more. And I usually wear a size 8, and this 10 was kind of my size then, and maybe even odd 12. And at the time, I wasn't as into this as I am. So in retrospect now, I can see it was absolutely dietary. Now, I did what has been advised. I was my own experiment. So I stopped eating those crisps, and I stopped eating the ice cream, and all my symptoms like bloating resolved. And I could see then that it was almost certainly because of the microbiome. I also could see that I was quite angsty, that kind of feeling in your gut that you wake up with the low feeling of low-lying dread. Now, it just happened during my life at that particular time. I would have had a very hard time also, but I was relating it completely to that, but it was microbiome, but a microbiome can be very upset by stress too. So it was multifactorial in my case. So I was my own experiment, and I can look back on that now and say, yes, I can understand how the menopause makes everything much worse, much more difficult. Unfortunately, half the population of the world go through it. All women go through it. And I think it's very important to accept it as part of our lot, really, and not be dreading it, because it's inevitable, like death and taxes. It's
Yeah, because I found I had my menopause was I had because I was interviewing Dr. Vita Birmingham, the menopause expert.
yes,
She's a nurse and midwife, and I went to one of her talks, and I said, "Oh my God, she had 45 symptoms." I said, "I have 35 of those," and I sat there and went, "Thank God, I'm not going crazy."
yeah.
However, the menopause was one of my most creative, liberating, and empowering time in my life. And that's where I refound my voice.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. And that's where I started also becoming a more interest and in my own health. You know, how you usually park your own health. So I became very, very sort of focused on, and then I had the radio program. So I was becoming even more focused with my research. And every program you learn something. And even from this YouTube channels now, I'm learning even more.
Yeah.
But I think it's fascinating for women to do that.
Oh, it's fascinating. It really is. Every day is a learning day. I absolutely love this. I think it's a lovely time, like post-menopause, obviously. I think you're less self-conscious.
Yeah.
You're less hassle, of course, family-wise, perhaps. And I certainly, like you, would have found my voice and found my confidence, which I never had prior to that. Completely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So it's
amazing.
all bad.
Yeah, there's a lot of negative press out there and media attention about the menopause, but I just think it was wonderful. I'm glad I went through it, and I'm glad I had it, and I'm glad on this side. I just loved looking back, it
Yeah.
was, yeah, you have to go through it like puberty, like childbirth. You have to go through it, you know.
It's not avoidable, unfortunately, unless you're dead by then, and then that's really awful. So
Yeah.
it is an absolute thing that we all, and it's lovely that you approached it
Yeah.
like that, and it made a difference to your life.
Yeah, it really
Good.
did. So tell us, we spoke earlier about the link from microbiomes to estrogen. There's a
Yes.
link to that, and can you tell us about that?
Well, the estrogen affects every part of the body, and I don't think the studies are showing exactly how it directly affects the microbiome. But don't forget that a lot of our hormones are made in the gut.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would deduce, and maybe I'm wrong, that what we eat, we make a lot of our hormones from what we eat, and they're made in the gut, and they turn into the messaging molecules, and the whole big kind of conundrum of messages that go around our bodies like neurotransmitters. And if we're not with estrogen anymore, it just generally upsets the apple cart in the microbiome. That is how I would see it from a very simplistic point of view. So the microbiome are there ready to make whatever it is from whatever it is. Okay, so if we're not producing estrogen anymore, so don't forget the microbiome both make these things and respond to them. So it's all very, very interlinked. It's all a complete big kind of a big carnival of everything happening all together. So the estrogen is way less. The microbiome isn't making it, isn't receiving it. And instead, it probably is receiving other things that probably aren't so ideal. I mean, there's a lot of things affect the vagus nerve and send messages to our brain. And you hear about people with the menopause and they fly off the handle, and they're really menopausal, if you like. And I know I've heard husbands accusing their wives of being menopausal, which is really cruel, I think. But I can see how if the apple cart is upset in the microbiome, then other substances that are less ideal might be more obvious and more influential, if you like, via the gut brain axis. And messages will go up to the brain that are less than ideal. And the blood brain barrier blocks nearly everything, but not everything. And there are these abnormal proteins that set off a series of all sorts of things, from depression to some of the cancers and to everything. And they can enter the brain and cause absolute ructions with some of the axes. For instance, the hypothalamus going to the pituitary, going to the adrenal glands would produce cortisol. And cortisol is our stress hormone, or one of them. And if abnormal messages get up to the brain, then that whole axis starts and we produce cortisol, which really upsets us. So I just think we've been simplistic about it without having a huge, because menopause is not my expertise, but I feel the upset in the apple cart in the microbiome is because estrogen is less, your body expects it, and the microbiome possibly, as well as making it, expects it, and it has to adjust. And if you're giving it the right things by which to adjust to, i.e. the right foods in order to make the right short chain fatty acids in order to make all these messenger molecules, you will do better. Like those 60,000 women they experimented on, they had 30% less symptoms. I think it will work much better. If you're, the one thing that's been shown really, really difficult is alcohol, unfortunately. And alcohol really, really upsets the apple cart and the microbiome at any age, but particularly in the menopause. And also has been linked to postmenopausal breast cancer. So it's the one thing around about the menopause that, you know, you see a lot of people and they'd wine ever since lockdown, especially at home, maybe a few evenings a week, and then, a bottle of wine at night or at the weekends. And far be it from me to kind of burst people's bubbles and upset them, but it is very deleterious to the microbiome and on any level, unfortunately. And the World Health Organization came out and said there's no safe level of alcohol, none, nada. Not even one. And you might argue about red wine, but the red wine that's argued about is part of that very exemplary Mediterranean diet, which, don't forget, is a lifestyle too. So they're there, very camaraderie on the streets in their lovely weather generally, eating the fruits of the land and chilling. They really do over there compared to here. And their red wine then is part of that. Our red wine is part of a stressed, hyper, ultra-processed diet, stressed lives, possibly stressed relationships. And, you know, they say you'd be much better off to eat a bunch of red grapes than drink a glass of red wine, because it's the red grapes give the wine its benefit. That's all, actually.
So. And it's really important, again, when we're going through the pregnancy, puberty, and menopause, our diet, our lifestyle is so important. And when I think of microbiomes, I think of that little communication communication area where they're all communicating different things to different parts of the body.
Are
fascinating, aren't they? They're like communicators.
It's absolutely fascinating science. I mean, it really is. To make us even be able to do this today, to think, to answer, to get up this morning, it all is what it's doing. All those messaging molecules are working for us, in us, on us, all the time, communicating. As I say, some hormones are neurotransmitters and vice versa. And the microbiome, the microbes both make and respond to these substances. So it's hugely complicated, but hugely simple, really, in that you feed it the good stuff and it does well. It is actually come down to that. With the other provisos, and I'll just go through them really briefly. Cigarette smoking, right? You may forget about it. If you smoke cigarettes, anything we've said today doesn't apply, because it negates every good that you do on every level. So it's an absolute no-brainer. And, you know, cigarette smoking is becoming, as you see, lot less popular, if that's the word, in Ireland. But unfortunately, our Eastern European immigrants all smoke, almost, and so do a lot of our Asian immigrants. So that is a problem. It's not there as much as here, as you know. Alcohol, I've mentioned, awfully important. Sleep, awfully important. Part of our stress lifestyle now is that insomnia is ubiquitous, really. It's everywhere. Our diet. And then outside, awfully important, you know, exercise and the nature, vitamin N, nature. Oh, really, really important. I did a talk for nurses on Saturday. I was telling them about the Nurses' Health Study, which was one of these longitudinal studies that I absolutely love. Started in 1976 in America. 121,700 female nurses between the ages of 30 and 55 in America. And it showed, if they looked at the 5 parameters, okay, they looked at their activity, they looked at their BMI, they looked at whether they drank, they looked at what they ate, and they looked at whether they smoked. If they could get these 5 parameters all ideal, i.e. optimal, i.e. not smoking at all, drinking in moderation, etc., that they would live for 14 years longer.
Right.
A longitudinal study Don't forget. So that is not 14 years now in a nursing home, gaga. That's 14 years of better health and good health. So if you're going to die at, say, 71, you weren't going to die until you're 85 if you did all these things. They're able to show that because it's a longitudinal study. The results are still coming in. A lot of them are dead. A lot of them are very elderly. And that's so important. That's so important. That's all doable, isn't it?
Yeah. You think my grandmother lived until she was in her 90s. My great aunts all lived until my grandmother was 92. My great aunts were 95, and then 97 and 98, and the same ages.
Wonderful.
Because they ate a better diet. They didn't have the stress of this lifestyle that I grew up in, and you probably grew up in it, and the younger generations. It seems to get more stressful and faster, and everybody wants everything now. Yeah.
Unbelievable. It
Yeah.
really is awful. I feel, even though, you'd look at youngsters like my own in between the ages of 25 and 33, and you say, isn't it well for them? It's well for them, but it's not well for them really, because things got very difficult. Very difficult. And I prefer to be actually the age I am now.
I love my age. And I think well, we grew up in the generation, I think, it was the last generation where there wasn't so much pushed on us. There wasn't so much social media. There wasn't so much peer pressure. And the Instagram lifestyle and having to have everything fast and everything. There was no, it was like everything had to be now, and everything had to be, you got a house. When I got my first house, we had secondhand furniture. Then we built another house, and it was, and then you appreciated doing up one room at a time, and everything perfect, that you have to look perfect. You have to have, even young people nowadays at 16 are getting Botox and things like that. And I go, you're beautiful. There's too much pressure.
They're so beautiful. They're beautiful young skin. And, Botox, the most poisonous substance known to man.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of bloggers, and they inject themselves within an inch of their lives. And I cannot for the life of me understand it.
No, I can't either. So how does then the microbiome hormones affect, we talked about breast cancer, post-menopause and post thing. How does that affect then the microbiome hormones and our health issues and women's diseases?
Well, it's the microbiome, Roisin, is absolutely central in all of the cancers. And they are showing that there are, again, like I said in my book, the good bugs are the mojo and bow, and then the bad ones, no so and fo. So there are bad bugs out there that are very happy and inclined to set off bad things like the cancers, not on their own, but they certainly contribute. So, say breast cancer, for instance, there is a genetic proponent, as you know, but like in any genetic proponent, there is a thing called epigenetics, okay, which means you change your genetic predisposition by how you eat and live. And there's very, very few really are absolutely doomed to be breast cancer if you can do things differently in your lifestyle. That is absolutely a given. The same with Alzheimer's. A certain proponent genetic, not even if you have a genetic, those two APO4 genes that, you're kind of a sitting duck for it, which personally I'd prefer not to know I had. You can change that by the way you live and eat. So all of the things, the microbiome is absolutely central in everything, because don't forget, it has your nervous system at its heart. It has your hormonal system at its heart, and it has your immune system at its heart. Now, they're all like that Venn diagram, multifactorial, all interlacing, coming and going, in and outing. The immune system is absolutely vital in all of this, because don't forget, our antibodies are produced in our gut also, and they're the ones that set off their messaging molecules are called cytokines. And you'd often heard maybe this term cytokine storm, where people get the autoimmune illnesses with the cytokine storm. And that is all originating from the gut, because the gut, if these aberrant proteins leak out of the gut, and if they will leak out of the gut if the microbiome isn't ideal, and the bad fellows are more prominent than the good fellows. So the gut is lined by a lining of like a lining, but also a mucus layer. And when you've got the good bacteria, the mucus layer is sustained. They both make it and sustain it. They just kind of are like the general factotum that patches up all the little holes and does everything really, keeps the gut pristine. Whereas you've got the bad fellows, they'll eat their way through this layer and out into the abdomen. And then it's picked up by the vagus nerve. And then the message is sent to the brain. And it's a simplistic way of looking at it, but it is absolutely true. And then it sets off this cytokine storm where there's something aberrant in the body, and it sets off everything that eventually down the road, if done in a repetitive fashion, will lead to the aberrant things that are the cancer cells in people. And we all are born with a lot of, we have our germ cells, and we have a lot of these extra little ones that we can call on if things are broken in our bodies, and they come and fix you. And they're really, really supported also by our diet, the way we live. And if you've got something that is needing a fixing and the cells aren't there to fix it, then the bad thing basically grows and grows and grows. And a cancer is kind of uninhibited growth of abnormal cells. That's what it is. And if there isn't enough, amongst other things, antioxidant things in the body, the antioxidants are what we get in our food, or our fresh food. They're not there to take on these baddies. The baddies are always there. They're in all of us. They're in you and I. They're in all of us. They're all ready to pounce. And if things are not ideal to keep them away, they will take advantage. So that's why your diet with the alcohol, with all the cancers, including breast and colon, with your saturated fats, which can be a problem because they will give you metabolic poor health, because you'll end up with the inflammation in your arteries, and that's 100% an inflammatory condition as well. All this leaky gut thing leads to an inflammation in your body, and that's what leads to the aberrant proteins, and they eventually lead to all the diseases, including the cancers. And there's a huge amount of research being done, and I know you can do everything right, and you'll still get some bloody awful disease. Okay, that does happen. They're the first to say it, but they're much less likely. And you can keep them almost all at bay if you live and eat. But you also have to think of your environment, your air. Make sure there's no mold in your house. Make sure what you're using on your skin is not toxic. Make sure what you're washing your clothes with isn't toxic. I could go on and on. But it's, yeah.
I want to come down to nutrients, and because you have fabulous videos on your Instagram page. I'm going to send everybody there, but we'll talk about that in a little moment. But how can we then optimize our microbiome?
You can optimize your microbiomes. The start of it would be your food, definitely, because if you're not eating right, then you might have some leaky gut and you get anxiety and depression. So if you're trying to treat anxiety and depression, if you're trying to combat obesity, if you're trying to combat, maybe an autoimmune illness, your diet is the first thing. Roisin, 100% the diet is the first thing. You can only do so much about the air you breathe. You can only do so much about your house that it doesn't have mold, but you can do a hell of a lot about what you eat. A hell of a lot. So what works right across the board, from preventing Alzheimer's to preventing almost all the cancers, to preventing depression, anxiety, is eat a plant predominant diet. Plant
vegetables.
No, it's not just vegetables. And that's what people think, oh God, do you remember? And you would remember, because you're the same as me. When you go, you'd ask for, wouldn't want the meat. And I'm not vegetarian now, but say 25 years ago, you went to a hotel and you wanted the vegetarian option. If turnip and carrots were on that day and potatoes, you'd be given those, wouldn't you? And they'd leave off the meat. So look at we've got, that's exactly what used to be. And that's why nobody wanted to be a vegetarian. But anyway, so neither vegetarian or vegan I am. Don't forget that. The plants are all the fruit.
Yes.
All the vegetables. all the seeds, all the nuts, all the herbs, all the spices, all the ferments, all the whole grains, and to a great extent, the omega-3 fats. They're what I'm talking about. All of them. They're not just the fruit and veg. That's really important to know.
And even adding the herbs. So adding herbs. So you could be making your dinner. Add in herbs and spices.
Yeah. Add in. As I was listening to that podcast from Zoe yesterday and they said, so, substitute something bad for good, i.e. say if you're eating the crisps, make the kale crisps with the nutritional yeast, and I add everything. Beside my cooker here, I can show you, I have a pot of black cumin, nigella seeds, and a pot of broken cashews. And they're not the only things I add, but if they're there on the counter, by God, you'll add them. So I will look at whatever I'm preparing. And I will want to look, if everybody just that listens to me today here, what you would say, look at their dinner, prepare, and say, what can I add to this to make it more healthy? What can I add? Not take away, add. It's a wonderful way of doing it. And for every 20 grams of fiber, that you add extra to your dinner, it increases your life years unbelievably on a cumulative level. It is so important. And, people are obsessed with protein. And we, as a nation, eat plenty of protein, probably too much. What we don't eat is enough fiber. And all of these foods have the fiber. And don't forget, they also have the antioxidants in them. And they also have the flavonoids. They have everything that's wonderful and life-giving, all of them. And we eat them and add other things to them. Basically, as a rule of thumb, you should have 30 plant-based foods a week in your diet. Now, that's all the herbs. If you use a bit of oregano, that's one plant-based thing. Now, I would make dinners now, and I have it to a fine art, and I would have 25 in a dinner, not a talk of in the week. So it's so doable. It's so doable. You just need to have the things beside you. I'll show you my black cumin seeds. They're right beside me. Because I'm sitting here in front of I got here this little jar I got in, my friend Olivia got me in deals. She bought 6 of them or something. And in there is the black cumin seeds and nigella. Anytime I'm making anything, I had them already this morning because I had my kind of vegetarian breakfast that I make. And I add these, put them on top of the veg. I have a jar of cashews there as well. I have a jar of hemp seeds. And in my press are any amount of seeds, and in my fridge are any amount of fruit and veg. Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be fresh herbs. It can be ones you buy in the supermarket as long as they're not processed.
Dried, frozen, dehydrated, it doesn't matter a damn. Frozen berries, super good for you. It doesn't matter. They're just as good as fresh. Doesn't matter. Organic, non-organic, it doesn't matter, but it does. If you can, A, source, and B, afford organic, do buy it because it is better for you. Probably. I mean, the studies are still out there, but if you've got ordinary stuff that you haven't been able to get organic, wash it well under running water. That's all. That's all you need to do. Where it comes to whole grains, it's worth a mention. Oatmeal is really, really good for you. You hear all these bloggers on, they're absolute disgrace saying oatmeal is toxic. It certainly is not. And the more natural it is, the better. So oatmeal is porridge, obviously, but I wouldn't dream of eating porridge on its own. It's like Oliver Twist and gruel to me. That is rotten. I couldn't eat it. So I add about 6 or 8 other things to it, make it much more interesting. I'd add so many seeds, chia anyway, definitely, and linseed because they're high in the omega-3s. I make a fruit compote with 2 different fruits every week that were frozen. It could be cherries and rhubarb. It could be strawberries and raspberries, whatever it is, that will go in. Then I'll have the berries that aren't into a compote, like the blueberries maybe. And in they'll all go together. And that is my breakfast, not just oatmeal. It's all those things. And using the oatmeal maybe as a conduit to get all those other things into you that are so good for your microbiome. They're down there all happy, eating away. And they're, yeah.
The microbiomes are happy, we're happy, and we're healthy.
Totally. I mean, it is absolutely. You are what you eat. The microbes are the key to all your health and happiness. There is no shadow of doubt about that. And I'd love to shout this from the rooftops, in a way, talking to you like this morning I am. I wanted to get children understanding this. So by the time
Where
they
you bought in your book, that's where
my
you.
book, because you see, by the time they got to the very difficult teenage years, like if you do it today. You see all the youngsters. I love talking to them on the street, and here in the Kenny and the Kieran's uniforms, or the CBS, those age, because they're on the street, and Loretto. And I say to them, do you know what the microbiome is? None of them know. Good God, I want to change that. I want them all to know. And whereas they might forget it in their hormonal fueled upset years of 14 to 18, when it comes to shove and they're upset and they're depressed and they may be gaining weight and they're angsty, they'll say, oh God, yeah, it's my microbiome. They'll know, so they'll go back to it. That's what I want for Ireland. I'd love to get the government to listen to me. It's very hard though, to get this taught in schools. I mean, that was only, in my idea, that was only a start, that book. I was going to follow it up with books 2 and 3. They were more advanced, telling more, like I told you today. And that's what I would love to do more than anything. But unless I get backing for this one, I can't go ahead with any more.
We have to start telling the world about your book. And not just Ireland, the world.
I really appreciate your help. Thank you.
And so also in that, would you say too, eating fresh food, in-season food, and locally grown food? You know how they say local honey is the best thing.
Yeah.
If you buy local honey from local producers, because they have all that honey with the bees, has the has the ingredients to help our immune system.
Yeah, it's so important. Local. I love local. I mean, Crown New at that farm on the parade on a Thursday. Oh, I'd be hyperventilating buying the stuff off them. And then the local honey, how much better is that than bloody artificial sweeteners? You know, if you're trying to wean yourself off putting sugar in your tea, put a bit of local honey in it instead. And even though it's still sugary, it's one hell of a lot better and less processed. I love in season. Now, that said, Roisin, I don't totally follow in season, in that I'll still buy the veg, even if they're not local and they're not in season, they're not available local and in season. I'm still buying them. Don't get me wrong. So I don't go through a season that I don't buy them at all. I will buy them always. For instance, avocado. You're not going to be able to buy avocados locally, and yet avocados are fantastic for you because they're so high in those omega-3s that are so vital for our future brain health. So, you know, I would absolutely, I mean, it's horrendous in Ireland. We import something like 90% of our
99% of our vegetables.
Horrendous. And that's the other thing. I'd love to be in government, because I'd change that too. I would give help to those farmers who are trying to grow them. And don't forget the likes of the legumes, which I didn't talk about, the beans, the pulses, the peas, the lentils. A lot of the beans can be grown in Ireland now as well. And why not give farmers subsidies to grow them instead of feeding cattle?
Yeah.
No, it could be done. It could be done. It really could be done. Yeah.
Maybe it takes women to actually get out there and start lobbying and start creating a campaign, you know.
Oh, I'd be on any campaign. I'd be happy out the door. Are you with your hair?
So, you know, we talked about should we be taking probiotics for our microbiome?
No. I don't encourage any medicines at all, or supplements as they're called. You see, the supplement industry is huge.
Yeah.
Worth, I can't remember, is it 8 billion every year in America? And in Ireland, we've got all our bloggers that produce their probiotics and their thises and their that's. And of course, they've got a huge social following. And if I got €1 for every time I asked a certain probiotic, look, the science is not there yet with probiotics. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Of those 100 trillion bugs in your bowel, there's hundreds of different varieties, and you're getting a couple of different varieties, many of them, but a couple of them, and they probably just pass on through your bowel. Don't be any good at all. The future will be probiotics to a great extent, in that personalized medicine is what they're starting now with Zoe in the UK. So you can send off a bit of your poo. They'll say, well, this is the ideal bacteria you should have, and here are these in a capsule. But we're not at that stage yet. And don't waste your money on them. Don't. Just go and buy fruit and vegetables, nuts, seeds, and fiber and legumes, and eat them. That'll give you everything. The fermented foods, and I didn't mention them, all the live natural yogurts, the cheddar cheeses, the kefirs, the kombuchas, they're full of live cultures. Don't go and be buying probiotics. There's no need. No need at all. I'll never be a famous blogger, you see, because I don't promote anything except food, proper food.
Yeah.
I do a bit of makeup, all right. But
yeah.
And a few companies do send me a few things, like Tan Organics are really into it. They certainly send me a few things now and again. But other than that, nobody owns me and nobody will own me.
Yeah.
I don't think it's moral or right to do that. You know?
And I think we're going back to, going back to basics, going back to eating if we eat the right food, the way our grandmothers did and our grandmothers' recipes, and go back to basics. There wasn't all these diseases back then, or what we know of. But I know by my grandmothers and their siblings that they were all healthy, and lived to a long age. And common sense, isn't it? It's all going back to common sense.
But common sense isn't that common.
No, it's not. Well, maybe it's time then. It's maybe the responsibility is on for our age group, the midlife women and postmenopausal women between 50 and 65, to get out there and start educating the younger women and showing the younger women the common sense approach to our health and our well-being.
100%. And if you can think of a way of doing it, great.
Well, maybe even just all getting onto YouTube and the different platforms we're on, people will follow and go back to the common sense. I personally think, from my media background and my degree in media and PR, and from broadcasting and now YouTube, I think the days of bloggers, the days of influencers have gone. I think they're dwindling out.
Okay, well, pleased to hear that. Even though I do love the blogging on makeup and that, I have to admit. But you know what? There's a lot of dysregulation about health bloggers. There's some absolute fiends out there that tell you the most horrendous things. And I don't know if you know Dr. Ives. Do you know him on Instagram? He's fantastic. He wrote the amazing book called Saturated Facts. So he's a doctor and a nutritionist. He did a nutrition degree. He is super. And he takes them apart, Roisin. He actually takes them apart, all those bloggers. He's not a bit afraid to call them out. And he follows it all up with facts, with the trials that are done, with the mega-analysis, he's unbelievable. And that's what you need, somebody telling them, they all just shut up with their rubbish. They're not qualified. They're obviously on, and then all of them will be on promoting their own rubbish. You can be sure of it. So I'm vicious about them now, and there's a lot of them out there, but he does something about it. I'm not brave enough, because when people have a go at me, as they do sometimes on Instagram, I do take it personally, even though I shouldn't. A lot of people will give me a hard time. I then block them. But he's not one bit afraid of it. Full on. Dr. Ives. I couldn't recommend him highly enough.
IVES.
IDZ. Dr. Ives. Now, a few fake accounts for him, but you'll see on Instagram he has the blue tick with him, and he's got 500,000 followers or something. He's unbelievable. I love him. He does a very good job, a very important job.
Well, then let's all start supporting one another who are creating the space and bringing back common sense back into the lives and back into the health and well-being and lifestyle and common sense approach to life. Let's all work together and bring that back, bring our grandmothers and our mothers' lives and common sense back to basics for the younger generation, because they need it.
They do need it. I'd be all for that. That would be just wonderful.
Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time, because I do appreciate it, because you are, I can't pronounce,
gastroenterologist.
And I have to put it down to about 4 syllables when I'm pronouncing it.
Yeah, but I prefer gut health doctor, because I have that much more in that I scope and I do this kind of stuff. I don't do general gastroenterology now. I just do ordinary this stuff. I scope people and I give advice on diet and lifestyle. As I say, I've ended up a lifestyle doctor and an accidental nutritionist. because
that's what we need. We need to go back to lifestyle doctors. That's what we need. So just remind our viewers, how can they source your book?
Well, it's in a lot of bookshops around Kilkenny. It's in Cannes Books always, and it's in several bookshops around Ireland. It's in the Castle Books in Mayo. It's in the bookshop in Ballincollig. There's a little individual one. I can never remember the name, but it's in a lot of little bookshops. But it can be got online from me by going into bugofwar.ie. That's my website that I was producing to be able to teach my book in schools, because the teachers insisted on having a website. So I did that, and it's available on that by buying it by PayPal, and I'll post it to you. I'd be delighted. Or if they message me on Instagram, and my Instagram name is my name, Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace Ryan, and the Revolut me, I'll post it to them, whichever suits. Yeah.
That is brilliant. And we can also put Can Kylie's bookshop, Can's book.
Can is wonderful. My best buddy. Yes.
Brilliant. And she's a real life source for any information. And she really does promote Irish authors. She really does.
Yeah. I love her to bits. She's wonderful. Yeah.
We'll put her link in as well. And let's start educating the younger generation of women, and then start going from children, as you said, to teenagers and to young mothers again. And let's bring common sense, lifestyle, health and wellness back to the younger generation.
Please, God.
Dr. Anne-Marie Eustace Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to Confident Women Ireland today.
It's a pleasure. And thank you, Roisin. Thank you.
And we'll also put the other video that you did with us in the description box below as well. I think that's where we were talking about the book.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. It's absolutely my pleasure.